Hello everybody, today's video is going to be about the Olympus XA and all the other versions of this camera, because there are sort of about four versions, and well, five versions actually, sorry, and there's subtle differences between them. They all look very similar when you look at listings on eBay, and people don't always know which version they're selling. So I've got the original XA, which is the only version that's a rangefinder, a true rangefinder, and you move this tab here just like you would the tab on a lens on a Leica to focus, and the rangefinder window is here, and you look through the viewfinder here, and this is really the one to get. But if we go through the kind of differences between them, and then I'll talk a bit more about this camera, and hopefully this video will help anybody that's looking to buy an Olympus XA, an XA1, an XA2, an XA3, or even an XA4. Okay, so the XA came out in 1979. They stopped making it in 1985. It's got a fixed 35mm f2.8 lens that goes up to f22. It has, as I say, rangefinder focusing, which none of the other versions did. The ISO is from 25 to 800. You set the ISO, I'll sort of show you here. So you set the ISO with this tab here, and that's the rangefinder focusing there. And this, you click this to, so I normally shoot ISO 200 or 400 film, so I just click this over to the right film speed. So there's no DX coding or anything like that on this camera. The fastest shutter speed the XA will shoot at is 1/500th of a second, and the lens is probably the best lens of all the versions. It's very sharp, 35mm f2.8, which is 6 elements in 5 groups, and it's a Zyko Olympus lens, and they only really kind of put that name on the lens if it was one that they were considered was the sort of top quality, best quality lens. Okay. Then came after this one was the XA2, which basically looks on the surface of it like the same camera. But the XA2 had a 35mm lens as well, but it was only a f3.5. It wasn't a 2.8, so it's not quite as fast a lens. But the big difference was that it's scale, zone focus only. So the tab that you've got here to set the f2.8, f4, f5.6, you don't have that there on the XA2. You have to set essentially your zone focusing. So if you're shooting somebody up close, sort of multiple people a bit further away, or sort of mountains off into the distance, so you don't have this tab here for rangefinder focus. In fact, there is a tab, but it's not used for rangefinder focus at all. It's as far as more, it's used to set the ISO. So if you don't mind zone focusing for sort of street photography, then the XA2 can be had quite a bit cheaper than the XA. But for me, I really like to be able to focus manually and make sure that I'm nailing focus with that rangefinder focusing there, especially as it's a bit faster, and because it shoots at f2.8, it would be harder to get things in focus that are close to you at f2.8 without that. So the XA2 came out in 1980, and it did actually also have a slightly faster top shutter speed, which was 1/750th of a second versus the 1/500th of a second of the XA. But as I say, it's just zone focus only. This camera has on the underside here, you can see it has this little tab where you can set it there, and it increases the exposure by 1.5 of a stop. So that's for backlit subjects where you need it to expose for the person rather than the sunshine behind them, which is very handy. It also has a battery check, which you can hear that's going off and the lights come on, and then it also has a self timer there, which when that's out and you take the shot, then there's a 12-second delay and it'll take the photo, obviously with the front open. And also what's great about this, acts as a little foot, so it keeps the camera stood upright, a little bit more sturdy. And the XA2 didn't have this, so you didn't have that 1.5 exposure comp for backlit subjects that the XA had. So for me, the XA is the better camera of the two because it's got a faster lens, it's got proper manual focusing via a rangefinder, and you've got the 1.5 compensation thing underneath the camera with that nice little foot that comes out for self-timer. Then Olympus bizarrely came out with a camera called the XA1, not to be confused with the XA, although this is the first, this is just called the XA. The XA1 is the third camera, came out in 1982. I would basically avoid this camera. You can only set the ISO to 100 ISO or 400, nothing else. It's got a fixed focus lens, so it hasn't even got zone focusing or a rangefinder. And when you open up the front, you'll see a selenium cell here. So it doesn't take batteries. The selenium cell is what's used for metering. And selenium cells famously kind of, if they've been exposed to too much light over the years, stop working because they've only got so much selenium in them, and then that's it. So I'd much rather always go with a camera that takes batteries than selenium cell. So the XA1 I would avoid. But it is a, if you are looking at one, it's a 35mm again, but it's an f4, so it's even slower. And its shutter speeds are 1/30th of a second to 1/250th of a second. So it's not even got a very good top shutter speed, whereas this has at least got 1/500th, and the XA2 is, as I say, 1/750th of a second. Okay, so then in 1985, the XA3 came out. Now this is exactly the same as an XA2, but it's got DX coding, so it can auto-detect your film speed. Otherwise, it's exactly the same camera as an XA2. It's zone focusing, but there was one big difference, was they brought back the 1.5 backlight exposure comp lever here, which was missing from the XA2. So if I wanted an Olympus XA and I wasn't bothered about it having rangefinder focusing, I was quite happy to have zone focusing, I'd go with an XA3 because you've still got that 1.5 adjustment for backlight photos, and also the ISO goes up to 1600, so it goes up, you can shoot faster film with that DX coding. And I don't mind DX coding. I'm not sort of too bothered about manually setting the ISO. All the film that I shoot, you know, has DX coding on it, so I'm not kind of trying to push and pull film too much. If you are trying to push and pull film, then you're going to want to get the XA2 or the XA, where you can set the ISO manually on the camera. And then finally, there's the XA4, which came out in the same year as the XA3. It came out in 1985. It was the only one made with a wide-angle 28mm f3.5 lens. It's zone focusing again, so you don't get the rangefinder focus, but it has macro focus from what I've read, it's like to 1 foot or 0.3 of a meter, roughly. But what it did come with, my camera's lacking it, is you have a wrist strap here that attaches there, and the length of the wrist strap was exactly the right length for your minimum focusing distance. So it was exactly sort of 0.3 of a meter long, so you could work it out and make sure that you when you're taking macro shots, that it was within that minimum focusing distance. To quickly cover off the other things, is when you buy these, often they have the flash with them. The kind of two flashes that are worth getting are the A11, which was the standard one that came with it and took one AA battery, or the A16, which is a bit harder to get, much better flash, it's bigger, better, takes 2 AA batteries. If you can get one of those, you know, try and get one. I'm personally going to have this as a in the pocket small camera, and adding the flashes on kind of increases the size of the camera by at least another half, because it kind of comes out here, and sort of defeats the purpose really of having a very small rangefinder that I can fit in any pocket. So the good points really are, it is a full frame camera in your pocket, and it is absolutely tiny. To show you in comparison, this is the Nikon One Touch, which is another really great camera, 35mm f2.8. Doesn't have, it's just autofocus, doesn't have a rangefinder manual focus on it, but you can see the difference in size. You know, the XA is absolutely tiny, and even the Olympus, which is, this is a very popular camera, it's a really lovely shape. I wasn't expecting the XA to be smaller, but and it's hard to kind of, but it's actually, it is shorter by a good sort of centimetre and a half, and it's deceptive actually how thin it is. It is just, I would say, fractionally thinner, or the same thickness, sorry, as the camera front to back. You can see there. So it's an absolutely tiny camera. And another camera that I really like is the Olympus Infinity Twin, but which is just a big chunky monster of a camera compared to the XA. You know, you could fit this almost inside this camera. It's so, look at that. See how small it is. So as I say, it's a full frame camera that's absolutely tiny, that kind of fits in your hand, and definitely would fit in your pocket. And like a lot of point and shoots, there's sort of claim to, but are probably far too big. It's got a superb lens, really sharp f2.8 lens. It's near silent because there's a leaf shutter. It focuses, this first version, the XA, focuses down to about 1 meter or less. If you can touch it with your finger, arm outstretched with your finger, you can probably just about almost focus on it. It takes two small LR44 or SR44 batteries. It's aperture priority. I tend to shoot aperture priority over shutter priority anyway, so it's nice to have a camera where I can just set the aperture and it works out the shutter speed. It's tiny, yet still a proper rangefinder. Like it's kind of been, it was touted at the, you know, in the day as the camera that the pros would take on holiday, because it's just that good. The lens is that good and it's that small. And it's lovely having that 1.5 exposure compensation lever on the bottom and the self timer, which gives you a nice 12 seconds to kind of get ready for it, and with that stabilizing foot. So there's just a lot to really like about this camera. Some tips I would give are the focusing patch on a lot of old rangefinders, but the XA particularly, I found it very faint, and I struggled to kind of line up the two images a bit because the rangefinder patch was a bit faint. And what you can do is you can either use a Sharpie and you just colour a little black dot in the middle there, and then when you're looking through and you're lining up the two images, because you've blocked out part of the image through this viewfinder, it makes the rangefinder image that you're trying to kind of line up that much clearer. And it just makes such a difference. I've tried the Sharpie, and then I thought, well, I used a bit of this stuff, bit of that to remove it, and then I then went with just a tiny bit of black electrical tape, which, I don't know if you can see that there, just in the middle. And then what that means is when you look through, I don't know if you can see, it doesn't really show it, but when you look through, that's actually completely out of focus, and all it does is it just darkens the image that's coming from the rangefinder, so that you can really see very clearly when you've aligned your two images. That's a good little tip really, and that's non-destructive because it's just a tiny bit of electrical tape that's just cut there and placed, and you can just take that off anytime you want if you don't like that. But having tried it on this and it made such a difference, I'll be looking at other rangefinders that I own and trying that technique. So just to kind of go through the camera, you wind on using this, so you take a shot and then you wind on, and the frame counter goes up. Take another shot. If you want to open it, you pull that up, and then that comes up like that, opens the back, on the inside. There you go. You pop the film in there, you pull it over, stick the tongue of the film in there, and set the aperture here from f2.8 to f22, and you push it all the way up like that for flash. So at the very top there's flash, and that's if obviously you've got a flash screwed in on the side. And then there's not much more to it really, and I've talked about the lever on the bottom for setting the 1.5 exposure comp there, and then you focus there like that, and then as you're focusing there, it's actually changing the numbers along the top there. So that's the closest, 0.5 to infinity there of a meter. It is just an absolutely fantastic camera, and this is a bit of a rough one and is well used, and I've had some issues with it, so I am on the hunt for a much better example of the Olympus XA, because it's the sort of camera that I just want to always have on me and use. So I mean, that's kind of my tips really. What you might get as well is when this camera arrived, I had it where the film counter wasn't working. It would only reset to about 10. And I actually found by just gently tapping it with my finger like that, I did that about sort of 15-20 times, it just sort of loosened the spring a little bit inside. Must have just been sat unused for a long time. And then when I opened the back of the camera and it reset, it then did reset to S. So just a little tip, if you get it, sometimes the springs get a bit lazy inside if they've not been used for a long time. You can just give them gentle taps and that will fix that issue. The other main issue with the camera is that the shutter is, it's not like a proper button. You kind of place your finger on it, and with the lightest touch it goes off. It just kind of makes almost like an electrical connection. So sometimes it doesn't react when you'd like it to, and especially if it's a really well used example. If people have been pushing down too hard on this, previous owners, that can actually make it a bit less responsive. When I first got this camera, I also had it where as soon as I wound on the shot, it would just take a photo without me having even touched it. So you can see there, like, but so I would say if you're going to get one, pay a bit more and get a really nice one that's that looks like it hasn't been used much. You can even see them sometimes still in their original boxes. It's not a camera that I would say wears well. If somebody's used this a lot and it's had lots of owners and it's had a hard life, then that shutter button can kind of be on the way out. And there are lots of guides online. I've found a few where people have described how you take the screws out here, which means that you can get this sliding door. You can then sort of create a gap there and get the door off. And once you've got the door off, you can then take the top plate off and you can kind of repair what's underneath that switch. But you don't really want to have to go through that if you don't, so I would say pay a little bit more and get a really good one, because it's just such a fantastic rangefinder. I can't believe that they've made a rangefinder with this good a lens in such a small package. There's maybe you can get like a Rolly 35, there's tiny little Rolly 35s, but that's just zone focusing again. It's not got a rangefinder like this has. So well worth picking up the first one, the XA. But if you like zone focusing, then go for an XA2 and XA3. And the XA4 with that wide angle lens is really hard to find on eBay, and when they do come up, they're very, very expensive. But yeah, I would say this is a really great camera, kind of probably in its day. It was for the serious amateur, or what the pro would take on holiday. Absolutely fantastic camera. Okay, well, if you're enjoying these reviews, like and share and comment, and I'll keep doing more. Thank you very much.